Big problems in New Jersey, big problems in Connecticut, big problems in Illinois, a lot of very blue states tipping Republican right now.
I can't remember how much Obama won New Jersey by, but it was healthy.
I think about
We're talking
15,
about a
15, 20 points.
All right,
let's talk about Connecticut.
And that's a 30-point shift from one Democrat to another within a 9-month period. That is kind of amazing.
You talk about another amazing shift. Senator Obama won Connecticut, I believe, by 25 percentage points. Right now, the incumbent Senator Chris Dodd down by double digits. That's about a 35, 40-point shift right now.
So much of it is about taxes, I think. Every time I talk to Jersey people, federal, state, local, property, they're dying of taxes.
And I will tell you what's going to hurt Chris Dodd and other Democrats right now in Connecticut. They're talking about raising taxes again. Remember, this is a state, let's bring Peter Schiff right now. This is a state, Connecticut, that didn't have an income tax until the early 1990s. Now we're having a budget problem, and once again, even with the Republican governor, we're talking about raising taxes in Connecticut. Again, I will say it again, and I'm sorry if liberals don't like hearing this. This is just like 93 and 94.
Wow.
Taxes were going up not only on the national level, but on the state and the local level, and it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
Well, you know, one of the reasons when I moved back to the East Coast that I chose Connecticut over New York or New Jersey was because there were lower taxes. Now I employ, I think, 50 people there because of the lower taxes. And, you know, when they first imposed an income tax in Connecticut,
it was right?
Yeah, it was because they had budget problems. And they said the solution is just to raise taxes. So they raised taxes, and now we have even bigger budget problems. What Connecticut should have done, instead of imposing an income tax, they should have reined in government spending. They should have forced government to cut spending then, and Connecticut still wouldn't have an income tax, and they wouldn't have these problems.
Well, you know, and again, Peter, you're a guy that, of course, you've achieved YouTube fame and been on a lot of shows because you predicted early on, 03, I think, 04, 05, that we were going to crash, that the housing problems were going to cause this crash. Now a lot of people want you to run against Senator Dodd. I get emails all the time. I mean, some of Ron Paul's people, I guess, have jumped on your train. Are you going to run against Chris Dodd?
Well, there's a good chance that I will. I mean, I don't have an official campaign yet. I have an exploratory committee. I've got a website, you know, schiffforsenate.com, and I am considering it. And it's because of what's been happening in government. You know, everything that they've done thus far has simply made the situation worse. I mean, we're in the eye of the storm right now.
I was going to say, I've read you saying that actually things may be a little calmer today, but you say, again, Dr. Doom as they've called you, you say things are going to get much worse in the future. Why?
Well, we've calmed the financial crisis, but what led to the financial crisis is an economic crisis, and that is yet to fully play out. We have a structurally flawed economy. It's based on borrowing money from the rest of the world and then using the money to buy stuff, mostly imported things. You cannot have an economy like that. This is a disaster in the making. All we've done is gone deeper into debt in the last year, and we've covered up the symptoms because we've been able to borrow so much more money. But as the global economy recovers, as they get out from under all their bad loans to the U.S., they're not going to be lending us any money anymore. So the dollar is going to keep falling, interest rates are going to rise, consumer prices are going to rise, and now Ben Bernanke is going to be forced to raise interest rates,
well, you know,
even as unemployment.
It's something that you say. It's surprising to hear that again this morning, and I'm sure it has to be concerning the Obama administration. We had Richard Haas, the president of the CFR, on earlier this morning, and he said they're going to have to raise interest rates at the same time to be able to borrow money from across the globe. At the same time, unemployment's going up. At the same time, the economy's slowing down. And Richard said this is going to cause a horrible cycle.
But it's not just going to be small increases, quarter points. We're talking serious interest rate hikes, maybe even into the double digits. And if you think about the situation the U.S. government is in right now.
Like 1979, 1980.
It could higher potentially. We have a lot more problems. We're much more deeply indebted now than we were then. And the big difference is, you know, back then we had long-term debt. Right now the government relies on short-term financing. It's an adjustable rate mortgage. The government made the same mistake that subprime borrowers made. They borrowed money not for 30 years but for 30 days. And so as interest rates go up, it's increasingly more difficult to service that debt.
Which increases it exponentially.
Let me talk to you about Connecticut. You're talking about your exploratory committee running for the United States Senate, and you just said, correctly so, that we're borrowing enormous sums of money from overseas, from China. China specifically. And when we get the money, we buy products largely from countries overseas. What do you do in Connecticut to restore industries that have left Connecticut decades ago? To my mind, they're never coming back. How do you provide jobs in Connecticut?
Well, they have to come back. I mean, we've been living in a fantasy economy to say that we don't have to make stuff. We do. What we have to look at is, how is it that we lost our industry? Why did we become so uncompetitive when we used to be the most competitive nation in the world?
So how did we?
Well, what we did is we encumbered our businesses with regulation and taxes that made them uncompetitive. What we need is to deregulate the economy and lower taxes, but we can only do that if we dramatically decrease government.
Okay,
we need to cut government spending.
You say deregulate the economy, and there will be critics that say, isn't that what we did on Wall Street?
No.
Isn't that what got us into this
No,
mess?
it's the exact opposite. You know, the reason that we're in trouble on Wall Street is because of regulation and moral hazard. Remember, it was because the Federal Reserve set interest rates, not the market, the Fed. And the Fed made a mistake. They put interest rates much too low. As a result, we had too much borrowing and not enough savings.
Cheap money.
Yes. And
Cheap
then you
credit.
had Fannie and Freddie that manipulated the housing market. They provided the moral hazard. They guaranteed mortgages. And therefore, when people around the world were loaning money to Americans to buy homes, they didn't really care about the underlying creditworthiness.
I agree with you on that, but on the other side of it also, too, is you had people like Paulson going to Capitol Hill when he was at Goldman's lobbying to get 40-to-1 ratio and leveraging. Wait, that encouraged moral hazard?
But they couldn't have leveraged up like that if the Fed didn't give them the cheap money.
Does that
and there was
encourage
also
moral hazard?
Well, that is the moral hazard, that the rates were so low.
Do you support 40-to-1 leveraging?
Look, if they can if they can get it in the private market, if creditors know that no company is too big to fail, that if you want to lend money to an institution that is leveraged 40-to-1, you might not get your money back.
Peggy?
You know what? Get real for a second. What are you imagining? Emergency legislation that would say we need conditions that allow people in Connecticut to have small factories in which they make shoes that we can sell in the United States? You want emergency legislation that allows you to have, what, no unions, no regulation? What are you looking for?
Well, it's not emergency legislation. We just have to restore competitiveness. Because when the world stops giving us their stuff, and that's the bottom line, all the consumer goods that we're getting, we're basically getting them for free because we're not exporting anything. We're just printing money.
I know that,
and when
but
the
what
world
I'm
cuts
really
us off,
asking is it really possible we could make things here again? Everybody wants to, but I think they look at the government and think, it's too complicated, they'll never allow it, we can't do it.
We're going to have to, because if we want to consume things, we're going to have to make things. And so if we don't make anything, we're not going to consume anything. And we're not going to be living in an economy that has anywhere near the standard of living we have today unless we restore competitiveness.
On the issue of the day, what's your position on health care reform?
Well, I mean, health care is another example where the government interfered with the free market to drive up health care costs. It's the same way they've driven up education costs. The problem with health care is, number one, too much involvement in health care, and the government subsidies to the insurance industry, which has forced health care prices up. I mean, if you look at the one area of health care where government isn't involved, in cosmetic surgery, prices have been coming down. Look at, breast augmentation or hair transplants.
Recessions are very good for bringing those prices down. So you're a no vote against health care reform.
Well, I think we need health care reform, but not the type of reform that the president has in mind. We need to re-empower the markets. We need to put the patient back in control of medical expenses. We need competition. We need free
no
market
extension of coverage for the uninsured.
Well, look, I think if the government got out of it, and we allowed...
You want to abolish Medicare? That would be getting out of it.
Well, I think Medicare has done a lot of harm in this country. It's helped drive up health care costs.
Are your parents on Medicare?
Well, my father, but...
and is he being harmed by it?
Well, he's a special situation,
is he
but
being
yes.
kept alive
Look, I think...
He's baiting you.
I think...
Don't go with this guy.
Peter, we've got to... you need to come back. And I'm serious. And I'm serious. Let's get you two guys back, because we got to go. Chris is yelling at me. But I would just like to hear you guys go back and forth. Will you do that, Peter?
Well, sure. I'd like to have a long debate on the health care issue.
That's great. We'll do that. Peter, thank you so much.